Imagine walking down the street in your neighborhood and you pass by a house that looks a little different. The lawn is overgrown with weeds so tall they sway in the wind. The flowers that used to be so bright are all dried up now, replaced by tangled vines creeping up the front porch. A thick layer of dust has settled on the windows. Cobwebs cover the trellises, and the mailbox is stuffed with old letters forgotten. Maybe you've noticed it before, but you brushed it aside, assuming the owner had moved away or simply neglected the yard. Day after day, you pass without giving it much thought. It's just one more thing in a busy world full of things to worry about. Life goes on. But what if that house wasn't just being neglected? What if it was a silent cry for help? What if behind those dusty windows and unkept yard was someone sitting alone? Someone waiting to be noticed, waiting for someone to care. Well, that's what happened to Marinella Beretta in northern Italy. Her neighbors assumed that she simply moved away. No one checked in, no one knocked on the door, no one noticed as time passed and the garden grew wild. For 2 years, she sat in that home, forgotten by those around her, until a fallen tree finally led authorities to her skeletal remains. Still sitting and waiting. 2 years. Now, it's a tragic reminder of what happens when indifference sets in. When people become so wrapped up in their own lives that they stop noticing the signs that someone might need them. We assume someone else will take care of them. We convince ourselves that it's not our problem, but in a way, it is. The overgrown weeds and the forgotten house remind us of a stark reality. When we stop noticing our neighbors, when we stop caring, we risk losing something vital. Our sense of shared humanity. In every corner of the world, across centuries and cultures, one truth emerges. The true measure of our humanity lies in how we care for each other. Yet, despite this shared wisdom, we often hesitate. Something holds us back. Fear, uncertainty, discomfort, worrying about getting it wrong, being judged, or feeling vulnerable. So what do? We turn away. But in doing so, we miss the deeper connections and purpose that come from stepping into that discontent and embracing compassion. So I ask, how many times have we sat at that red light, that corner, refusing to look at the panhandler to our left, who's holding that sign? And you know what sign I'm talking about. I'm talking about this sign right here. That sign. Silently pleading with you to notice the sign, but also to notice him or her. But that voice in your head keeps telling you, don't you dare look. Don't you do it. Don't do it. And thoughts start rushing through your head. You remember the stories about some panhandlers making up to $300 a day. So you ain't about to fall for that. You say to yourself, they likely got more money in their bank account than I have in mine. You recall that GoFundMe scam where a couple pulled on people's heartstrings, asking them to help a homeless veteran. But the whole story was fake and made up, and they ended up deceiving people out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then you started thinking about how you yourself have been burned by scammers and grifters. You gave that contractor the money up front because they said they really needed it. Then they failed to show up for the job. What about the time you gave that family member a place to stay and they stole from you? Or you gave them a week to stay and they stayed 3 years. I bet you know somebody, right? You remember all of this, but you still won't look at that panhandler because you know not to trust your heart. We know our hearts all too well. They melt far too easily. That pesky heart of yours that actually does give a damn. That loving, forgiving, joyous little thing that gets in the way of our indifference and in the way of our stories about the other and makes us all gooey and gullible. So we don't look because we know better. Because if we do, we might just see what? We might just see their humanity. Might see ours. By now, you've started arguing with that red light. When is this darn light going to change? Am I talking to anybody here, or is that just me? I remember when I was in Raleigh, and I was at this light, and it was a double turning light, and there was this gold Mercedes in front of me, and this young man that was standing over here, and he was talking to this man in the car. Then the young man came back to me, and I was the second car in that row, and I gave him $2. And I saw that guy's in front of me, his hands was waving outside the car. Then I saw him in the rearview mirror, and he was looking, and he was angry or mad at something, and I didn't know he was mad at me. But then the light changed, and all the cars started going, and he stayed there. And he wouldn't move. And I kept blowing, and he wouldn't move. And then when the light turned yellow, just about to turn red, he drove off. And then I was stuck there at the red light. I was like, did he just do what I think he did? Yeah. So I asked the young man, I said, what did he say to you? He said, I was worthless and that I needed a job. And then he shook his head like that. And I knew from his head shake that he had a story that guy didn't bother to learn. Now, I didn't have time to learn it too, because I wasn't going to miss that second light. But I gave him $20 more. You see, the truth is, many of us have been taken advantage of. And it's true that there are many grifters out there. But most of the people asking for help aren't there for a big payday. Many are struggling with homelessness, mental health issues, or addiction, just trying to survive this thing called life. And while we may not know the full stories of those asking for help, we can't ignore the humanity behind their struggles. But I get it. Many of us, burned by past experiences, start to question whether or not any of our efforts even make a difference. Some of us have grown tired of being called to love our enemies and do good to those who persecute us, especially when everyone else seems to be content expressing outrage, cynicism, apathy, and a good old-fashioned case of not my problem. Sometimes it feels like the world is asking more of us than we're capable of giving. Now, what I am describing today has a term attached to it. It's called compassion fatigue. It's not just physical exhaustion, it's emotional, mental, and even spiritual weariness. We don't just get tired of doing the work, we get tired from feeling too much, from seeing too much suffering. In today's world, compassion fatigue can come from overexposure of trauma. With non-stop news of wars, disasters, and violence, along with the political stress and personal struggles in our families and communities, it's easy to see why we are so drained. We see so much suffering that we begin to shut down. It's our way of protecting ourselves from feeling overwhelmed. But in doing so, we often end up disconnected from others and sometimes even from ourselves. Yet even in the midst of exhaustion, moments of connection can break through and remind us of the power of just showing up. Recently, I had a long day filled with meetings and hospital visits, and I was completely drained, running on empty, folks. But I knew I had one more visit to make, and so I did it. But I was worried that I wouldn't be present with that individual when I got there because I was so tired. But when I walked in the room and this person's face lit up, they were celebrating me being there, celebrating my presence. And I knew that they were going through a tough time. But it was when I saw how they celebrated me that all my exhaustion just faded away. I took on strength. Their strength lifted me. I remember leaving that place, leaving that room feeling more uplifted and energized than when I first walked in. It is in these moments when we are at our weakest that we often find the unexpected strength from the very people we aim to support. How many times have you shown up to help someone only to realize they ended up helping you? You went in to serve but walked away with something you didn't expect, whether it was strength, peace, or perspective. We can never predict how serving others may impact us. The unexpected blessings, lessons, and even healing that come our way are often as powerful as the help we think we're giving them. It is indeed a great privilege to be entrusted with serving others. Now, we can't help everyone we meet, but when we can and when we do, we feel more alive, more connected, more human. When we stay open-hearted and refuse to let the world's pain and hardships make us indifferent, we fulfill something deep inside. It's about being willing to risk discomfort. Philosopher Simone Weil once wrote, "Compassion directed toward oneself is humility." We've got to remember that taking care of others sometimes starts with taking care of ourselves. And taking care of oneself sometimes involves reaching out to others for help. Just as we strive to support others, we have to have the courage to lean on our community when we are in need. Author Simon Sinek explains that asking for help is an act of service. Don't deny the people who love you the honor and privilege of being there to support you in your time of need. He explains that we build trust not by offering to help someone, but by asking for help. When we ask for help, we reveal our vulnerability, showing others that we trust them enough to lean on them. It creates a deeper bond because it requires honesty and humility, acknowledging that we cannot do everything alone. And friends, we are not meant to go through this life alone. When we're tired, scared, or uncertain, it's our family, our friends, and community that help carry that load. So if you need help, reach out and remember that we are here for one another. I say that because in our community, compassionate care doesn't belong solely to the care team. We're all in this together. Looking out for each other is something we all do. And for those of you already part of a small group, whether it's one of our choirs, the supper club, a support group, or any other of the close circles in our congregation, these smaller communities are where we truly are known. It's where you share meals, experiences, and pieces of your lives that people outside of your close circle might not see. These groups are where real connections happen, making them the perfect place for healing care to occur naturally. This is what compassion in a community looks like. Caring for those nearest you and building relationships. So while the care team is always here, those of you in these smaller groups have the chance to carry out the everyday work of compassion with each other. Together, we are creating a community where no one needs to feel alone, no one needs to feel overlooked, and no one needs to feel uncared for. Now, compassion doesn't always mean stepping in to fix a situation. Sometimes it's as simple as seeing someone, looking, acknowledging their existence and their value, even if we can't personally meet their need. That recognition alone is a form of service. It affirms the dignity of others and opens us up to the transformative power of compassion. The story of Marinella Beretta that I shared at the beginning of my message should serve as a moment of reflection for all of us. The tragedy of her life was that she didn't have the threads of connection needed to sustain her. We may also ask, why was she so alone? What might have been her reasons for not reaching out for help? Perhaps she felt ashamed of her circumstances. Maybe she didn't want to burden others, or possibly she had lost trust in the people around her. Fear, pride, and trauma can sometimes lead us to isolate ourselves and not ask for help. And building connections is a mutual effort. And sometimes those who feel most disconnected must take the courageous step of reaching out. If you are in need, call somebody, reach out. Now, the town's mayor said after the discovery of Marinella's body, "This is a moment to be together," he said. "And even if this woman had no relatives, we could become her relatives." Now, that's a powerful call to take on the responsibility of community, to see each other and act as family for those who are isolated, forgotten, or suffering. Now, one of her neighbors remarked, "I feel so sad that I didn't know that she had died." But what's really sad is that they didn't know she lived. It wasn't just her death that went unnoticed, it was her life. And no life should go unnoticed. How many Marinellas are there in our community? People who may live in isolation, whose struggles go unnoticed because we are perhaps too overwhelmed or too busy to notice. Or perhaps we are the one needing help, but for whatever reason won't ask. So today, I leave you with these questions. Will you have the courage to ask for help when you need it? And with all that you have given in your life, will you be open enough to receive when it's time? Because the truth is, we build more bonds by asking for help than we do by offering it. Because when we ask for help, we allow others to show up for us. And in that moment, we forge connections stronger than any single act of giving could ever create. Please join me in a meditation, if you will. Take a deep breath, letting the air fill your lungs. As you exhale, release any tension in your body and simply be present in this moment. Now close your eyes, if you will. Picture yourself by a calm river. The water flows gently, reflecting the warm light of the setting sun. You watch as the leaves float by, noticing the small and the beautiful details that are often overlooked. Now shift your focus, if you will, to the people in your life, those who might need your care today, those who could benefit from a kind word, a gentle presence, or just a moment of your time. Now breathe deeply again. Now this time, think about those moments when you might need help. Be reminded that all life is both frail and magnificent. And in this interconnected web of existence, we are all each other's keepers. We all walk each other home. Remember, you are not alone. Breathe in, feeling the warmth of connection, both in giving and receiving. And breathe out, letting go of anything that holds you back from embracing these moments of shared compassion. And when you're ready, open your eyes. As you carry with you, I want to encourage you to carry with you this sense of balance, knowing that both giving and receiving help deepen our connections with each other, and strengthen our community. May it be so.